Alright, on to Chapter 6 of Life and Teaching of the Masters of the Far East, Volume 3. Chapter 6. My only apology for dwelling in detail upon the experiences of these few days in regard to the bandits is to portray as conclusively as possible the power of one man clothed completely in his divine right of dominion and mastery, to turn the energy and zeal exerted and sent out by a great lawless horde to the complete protection of himself and the whole district. This protection was not only afforded, but the energy and zeal released by the horde was so great that when it was magnified, energized, and returned, it caused those who would destroy to turn upon and destroy themselves. It also afforded complete protection to the whole countryside for many miles around, although the inhabitants were outnumbered by the bandits at least 3 to 1, and they had no visible weapons of defense. As soon as the excitement and the shock of the previous days had abated, we returned to our work and with renewed interest. The Easter season was fast approaching, and we wished to complete our work in this locality in order to return to India. From this time on, our work drew rapidly to a close. The last details preparatory to the return were completed the day before Easter. We looked forward to Easter Sunday as a day of complete rest and relaxation. On our way to the temple long before dawn, we found Chandra Sen seated in the garden. He arose to accompany us, saying that our chief would meet us in the sanctuary. He suggested that we return to India by way of Lhasa, thence to Muktanath, through the Trans-Himalayan Pass to Kendarnath, thence to Darjeeling. As we reached the foot of the ladder which led to the temple entrance, we halted for a moment to view the approaching dawn. Chandra Sen placed one hand upon the ladder and stood as though about to ascend to the tunnel entrance. In this attitude he began talking. Light does not comprehend darkness, as it shines through darkness. When Jesus saw that he was to be betrayed by Judas, he said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. The mastermind did not say, 'Judas betrayed me.' He did not refer to Judas at all. He understood and held only the allness of the glorified Christ of God flowing through himself. Thus we see that perfect mutual action works out all in harmony in its own way. Now you can say, Christ stand forth more and more definitely, so definite that you are myself. In fact, now are we one body, one mind, one spirit, one whole complete principle. You are, I am together, we are God." The moment he ceased speaking, we were in our sanctuary, the center room of the Tau Cross Temple. We had scarcely composed ourselves when Jesus, and a number of others, including our chief, entered the door that communicated with the ledge. As they entered, a great burst of light filled the room. Greetings were exchanged, and we were introduced to the stranger who entered with them. He appeared to be an elderly man, yet very vital. We were told that he was one of the munis who had charge of the caves near Hasnapar. He was returning to that district and would accompany us. He had known the great Rishi Vegas, and also had met Rishi Agastya, whose hermitage is located in that most lovely yet secluded spot. We were overjoyed at our good fortune. We formed a circle, and placing both hands, palms down, upon the table, stood in deep silence for a few moments. Although there was not a word uttered, the room was completely filled with a strange, pulsing, vibrating emanation. It was an entirely different sensation from anything we had ever experienced, and at first seemed to overwhelm us. The rocks pulsated and vibrated with a resonant musical tone. This lasted only a few moments. When the stillness was broken, we were told that this morning we would see the creation of the universe in pictures. These pictures would be a representation of that which happened when our universe came into existence. We stepped through the door, out upon the ledge, and walked to the edge. It was still an hour before sunrise. The dead calm of the absolute silence enshrouded us. The time was propitious for the unfolding of another birth. We were looking out and out into infinite space, our souls eager and expectant. The Muni began by saying, "There are but two events in the world. That which was in existence before consciousness began to assert itself is now and ever shall be, and the things that humanity has thought and will think about. That which was before consciousness began is eternal. That which humanity thinks is changeable and inconstant, that which was before consciousness began is truth. That which humanity thinks is truth to them. When the law of truth comes to consciousness, it will erase all that humanity has ever thought erroneously." As the centuries roll on and push back the material veil by the process of evolution, thoughts come through the mind of humanity that revert back to truth, or, as we call it, the original cosmic fact. And these thoughts that fill the memory of the past, faced with the facts of the present and overshadowed by prophecies of the future, stand out definitely upon the path of the whole evolving race consciousness. Thus, the race is called back again and again to the original existing principle. By this return and repetition, humanity is shown that creation is eternal. The same with all mankind, but mankind's creatures are always changing, and they are under a manifestation of law called action and reaction. When human beings have gone far enough in their creation of creatures, the great absolute law of truth takes a hand in bringing them face to face with the original plan. Thus, we see that cosmic law never allows life to run too far in a tangent. This law is always polarized in equalization, balance, and harmony. In spite of idols or creeds, it will crowd mankind on into complete union with absolute realities. All things that are not in perfect accord and union with actual, existing cosmic fact must erase themselves when the absolute law of truth holds sway in the human consciousness. The thoughts of humanity are always so formed as to release their imperfect creations that are only born of half-truths when truth arrives. Cosmic absolute law must be fully satisfied. Thinking, speaking, or acting the law of reality is bound eventually to lead humanity into law, or reality itself. The ancients tell us that every tree that the Heavenly Father has not planted within you will be uprooted. Let them alone, blind leaders of the blind. If the blind always leads the blind, shall they not fall into the same ditch? The cycle is fast closing in which the blind of the whole race have led the blind into a welter of ignorance, superstition, and delusion created by those who believe as human beings think, rather than that which is true and real. The civilization that has risen on the delusions and superstitions of the closing centuries is submerging itself in the welter. Through the pain and tragedy of the misappropriated creations, a new race consciousness has been conceived and is fast evolving. In fact, the door is opening wide for its new birth. There is no other course than to go on from one plane of consciousness to a higher and more advanced step in the actual cosmic path. The only condition forbidden in the vibration of the great cosmos is that quality of thought which allows the human race to become so solidly fixed in what it believes that, if it clings desperately to its old delusions and will not let go, it can in no way come into the greater expanse of universal thought. Those thus absorbed in personal consciousness must go on through natural exhaustion of beliefs and experiences until they fail to go forward. Then, of its own accord, absolute law wields a progressive hand through disease, pain, and loss until the human is satisfied and turns to find the curse of a false idea within the idea itself. If a race or nation refuses to let go of things created by a portion of human thought instead of that which really exists, the law takes a hand in its progress by allowing the accumulated vibrations sent out by such a condition to reflect back upon itself through the light ray. Then, with war, strife, discord, and death on every hand, that race or nation is wiped out, in order that it may be placed again in a new uplift of creation. Thus it can begin over again in a new contact with that which was before the beginning of human consciousness. Civilization today is fast approaching a great reconstructive moment. All things that seem so stable and well-founded now will soon be immersed in a state of inversion. Every tree that has not been planted by truth will be uprooted. There is approaching a complete cosmic overthrow of the present social, political, financial, and religious institutions that will make room for the placing of the new era in order that humanity may come in closer touch with that which is and was established before the present human consciousness submerged and set it aside. Truth waits on with attentive, loving, and radiant beneficence until man will see that he can embrace and become the consciousness of that which has always existed. Humanity is taking this forward step from the cradle stories of the former generation, and their creations are no longer of any avail to the arisen individuality and spiritual discernment of the consciousness of the generation that is fast approaching. Delusions, traditions, and superstitions are nearing the end. It is also true of the civilization which they established. The old idols are good enough for the infantile consciousness that is nearing an impasse. Their delusion has caused their undoing, as they are proven to be only cradle stories woven by a mastercraft of priesthood and preceptor to lull into false sleep the crying infants of an evolving race. Those who saw further afield did not cry, and thus were not lulled to sleep. Most of them saw that the cradle stories were not true, and many stepped boldly forth to erase the untruth, as they saw directly through to the absolute, that which has always existed and which has always been seen and known, the contacted directly by a portion of mankind. From this portion there will arise a new and more vitalizing consciousness, fully awake and ready to erase the idols that man has set up for his fellow man to follow and make room for the new ideals, which are as old as creation's dawn. These will demand of those who teach, lead, or inspire the race consciousness that they shall do it from a plane of actual living contact, so high that there can be no mistake or contradiction, and on a plane of interpretation that is so simple that it cannot be misunderstood. The awakening tiger of higher intelligence and spirituality will refuse to sleep again, as it is already ravaged with the fragments of the past and disappointed with the torture of misplaced confidence. It will demand a stronger and more vital thought, with instruction based upon truth itself. The multitudes are now listening, over the heads of past centuries with their creed-bound traditions, to the old message that, to the newly born, is working its unfoldment into the hearts and lives of mankind. This new old message is the clarion call that is heard above the changing voices of creed-bound priesthood. It is louder than the voice of battle. It is louder and clearer than the muffled contradictions of financial, industrial, political, and religious lies. In spite of the creed-bound thoughts of a portion of humanity, their traditional and idolized ideas of God, of Christ and man, of self, of life and death, all must go, and in the absolute freedom from these preconceived ideas, there must pass and thus be erased all that was built upon them. There is looming upon the horizon of this new approach of redemption that has an entirely new meaning. This new multitude, coming out of this clearer vision and more definite perception, is redeemed through deeper revelation emanating out of all races and all people. That emanation is the one life that is in all and through all. In spite of the delusion-bound multitude, their clinging hands and cringing attitude, a greater and more noble vista of the expanding horizon of God, the Christ of man, the Christ of God, of self and death itself, is looming. And another cycle of spirit is dawning for the whole world. Another age of the crystal race is coming up out of the maelstrom. Whenever a people or nation think of God as absolute, that people or nation is God, for God is established unto them. As they love, worship, and reverence that ideal, they do become God. In the fullness of time they have reached their heritage, that which was first and is established in spirit. Whenever an individual thinks of God, he is God. God is established unto him. Breathe life into humanity. It means the same, God. In this greater understanding of cosmic revelation, men find God the same as God was before human consciousness began to manifest, the same yesterday, today, and forever. There is slowly rising from the ashes of orthodoxy the actual temple not made by hands, eternal in heaven in man. A great new race of thinkers is coming to the fore with Herculean strides. Soon the tides will surge over the earth to sweep away the debris of delusion which has been strewn over the paths of those who are struggling along under the load of evolution. The work is already accomplished. Hundreds of millions are re-released with their heart, soul, body, and instinct free. They are the throbbing pulse of an unborn race that is again heir to the ages. I see them stepping across the ages, walking hand in hand with God. Great waves of wisdom flood toward them from the eternal shores of the infinite. They dare to step forth and declare themselves a part of eternal God, eternal Christ, God and man, one eternally with eternal life. They dare to step forth and declare to heaven that much that is written by man is a lie, and in terrible blindness wrought. This new pulse consciousness is the crest of the wave that rests on the new race consciousness. This new race sees man, himself, the highest expression on this planet, and one with God through the medium of his life. And it sees that his whole supply flows through that life itself. This race knows that man can live consciously in a perfect universe, and with perfect people, and in perfect accord with perfect situations and conditions, with absolute assurance that there is not an error in the great spiritual plan of the cosmos. Man sees God as cosmic spirit pervading everything. Then, with the subtleties of mind through this thought, he does not hesitate to review the fundamentals that have placed him where he is and made him that which he is. Thus he is again one with his sources. He knows that this source is the ever-silent side of his God-mind linked consciously in thought and amalgamated with infinite mind. This new race understands that, through sun and shadow, without the bitterness, the soul's true quest for love and true peace is the truth of God and man. This race does not hesitate to strip the swaddling clothes of delusion from the whole human race. The gaunt specter, which for ages has bound the feet of the weak and doubting ego man, through his own ignorance will be completely erased. He finds he has erased his every limitation through his true selfhood, completely arisen. He has raised himself from man, to God, to God.